The shift in the U.S. Supreme Court towards a preference for the free exercise clause is significant.
It's dangerous.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here is your host and moderator.
Welcome, viewers, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Andrea Luxton. I am the president of Andrews University in Michigan, and I serve as today's moderator. I'd like to introduce to you our panelists for the day.
Hello, I'm Tony Matthews, and I am the senior strategist for missional ministries for a network of churches in the state of Texas. I am also a Baptist minister.
My name is Mel Robeck. I'm senior professor of church history and ecumenics and special assistant to the president for ecumenical relations at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California. I am also an ordained minister with the Assemblies of God.
Hi, I'm Carl Troball. I'm professor of ethics and history at Concordia University in Austin, Texas.
Hi, my name is Dan Levin. I serve as senior rabbi at Temple Bethel in Boca Raton, Florida.
Thank you very much to all our panelists for coming today. And now, an introduction to today's topic. In a June 2022 article, New York Times columnist Ian Philbrick writes that, quote, the Supreme Court has become the most pro-religion it's been since at least the 1950s, and it appears to include the 6 most pro-religion justices since at least World War II. Looking at actions taken since 2005, when John Roberts became Chief Justice, he notes that in orally argued cases, the court has ruled in favor of religious organizations 85% of the time. Other cases under consideration are also likely to go the same way. Items under consideration have included state tuition payments to religious schools, the rights of organizations to choose not to work with LGBTQ clients, and the right to pray publicly in school sports. Some, such as Justice Sonia Sotomayor, sees this pro-religion shift as a dangerous move that risks dismantling the wall of separation between church and state. Others applaud these moves as supporting religious liberty. With these different perspectives in mind, the panel is asked to consider the following questions. Do you consider the apparent shift in the Supreme Court as significant, and if so, in what way? Do you think that the Supreme Court is putting at risk the wall of separation between church and state by their actions? And do you consider recent rulings have appropriately deepened commitment to religious liberty? We're going to return to those that started our conversation for their initial comments.
Well, thank you. It's always wonderful to be with this great panel and to be with all of you. The last few weeks in our program, we seem to be returning to this question in a variety of different ways. And I think that is in large measure because of the consequence of the really remarkable, significant decisions that have come down from the U.S. Supreme Court, specifically in the last term. I mean, if you think about the questions that we've addressed on this program of Kennedy versus Bremerton School District, which found in favor of a football coach that was leading prayer during or in the after a football game, or the remarkable overturning of Roe v. Wade and the findings in overturning Roe v. Wade of questioning that right to privacy that Roe v. Wade asserted, which then has the possibility, as Justice Thomas asserted, that might affect all kinds of things, including same-sex marriage and other questions that will have profound impact on the lives of millions of people in the United States. I think there's no question that how the Supreme Court rules on any question is going to be consequential, but you're seeing a really remarkable shift. There are two competing interests that have, I think, made part of the genius of the First Amendment. And the First Amendment says that Congress shall, make no law with respect to the establishment of a religion or impacting the free exercise thereof. I'm paraphrasing. And so the idea that Congress will not allow any law respecting the establishment of religion was a very, very clear statement that says America is not a Christian nation. America is not a Jewish nation. America is this brand new thing that we've discovered in the Enlightenment called a secular nation. Now, that doesn't mean that the inhabitants, the citizens of the country are supposed to be secular, but they are to be given the freedom from the state to practice their religion as they individually and collectively see fit. It's also part of that free assembly provision in the Constitution that says you can gather with people peaceably how you choose to gather. And that government is not going to impose religious systems or religious ideologies on the citizenry. At the same time, we're going to protect and defend the right of any citizen to practice their religion as they individually see fit. How you balance those two competing interests is really a remarkable question. And you have seen over time in American history, sometimes you have more of a preference towards solidifying that wall between religion and state. And sometimes you see, as we have today, more of a leaning towards the allowance for people to have free exercise. The reason why I think this is significant is not because the free exercise of religion is a bad thing. The free exercise of religion is a wonderful thing. It has allowed America to be a far more religious society than almost any other Western country. I remember reading an article that said that the religiosity of Americans is about the same as those of Iran. We're a religious people, we as Americans, in all of the diversity of who we are as Americans. The challenge with some of these is when you start leaning towards a slippery slope that would make it harder for religious minorities to be protected from the hegemony of the majority, where you would start beginning to see the encroachment of an established religion or that a preference towards a particular religious ideology. Of course, the vast majority of Americans are Christian, but what makes America so great is that people who are Jewish, like me, are not made to feel like, well, we'll let you be here as Jews as part of a Christian nation. But no, this is not a Christian nation. This is a nation in which we practice our religions with freedom. And that's part of the concern that I see with some of the decisions that this court has proffered in the last few months.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Dan, you did a nice job of just setting the whole context, and then you're tipping toward the danger that I really wanted to address, that I see as a danger. You may find it ironic that I find that the free exercise of religion might have gone too far. So that's what it sounds like with the Supreme Court. But my concern as a religious person, again, a scholar of religion, who supports civil religion in America and everything. But the problem is, for me especially, is that in the name of defending freedom, the free exercise of religion, I also believe that it really undermines the right of free exercise for certain individuals, especially, as Dan mentioned, my Jewish brothers and sisters, my Muslim brothers and sisters, because the free exercise has allowed Christians to dominate precisely the space that is meant for everyone, and it provides even coercive people for people who are not Christian. I mean, let's take, I know we covered this a number of weeks ago, but to go back to the Kennedy versus Bremerton School District, I don't know about you, but anyone who's been part of a team knows that if you don't follow really what the coach is doing, there's a tremendous pressure on you to follow along and to do it just to fit in, or possibly to get a good grade, or to the peer pressure of the esprit de corps, all of that. And when a coach is allowed to, on school grounds, Granted, it was after the game was over, but still was on school grounds. He's still a coach. He has this ability to influence all these people who are coming out onto the field to pray a Christian prayer. To me, it's just that's a coercive state. I mean, even as a Lutheran, I remember sitting in prayers in Minnesota by some teachers that made me really uncomfortable as a Lutheran, the way that they were praying, because I really didn't agree. And I thought, this is really inappropriate. You can do this on your private time when I can choose to be there, but you're forcing me into something I don't want to do. And this is what I'm afraid of, is that there's this coercion. And I mean, I don't know if I really want to take up Roe v. Wade and now the reversal, but here's a concern I have. There are laws right now in the states on abortion that would not allow a woman to have an ectopic pregnancy because the fertilized egg inside her fallopian tube is considered a life. And I'm just and this idea that life begins at conception, I get. I mean, this is opening up a can of worms, I realize. But here's the thrust, is that this is in part a religious belief. That now if you believe that the life of the mother is more important by religion in a very difficult situation, why is the government insisting that you have to choose the fertilized egg over the life of the mother by law? I mean, or in the case of a rape, these are such specific situations where one's religious conscience has to make that decision, because ultimately it's a decision you face before God. And I find this court to be favoring a very conservative interpretation of how do I want to say that? They are favoring a conception of human life that is very evangelically Christian, a conservative evangelical Christian in its form. And I feel that in the name of free expression of religion, that what they're doing is imposing upon a number of people some specific ideas that are Christian alone. So.
Great. Okay. Good conversation. Who wants to weigh in next? Tony?
Am I up?
I don't know.
Okay, well, yeah, and listen, hey, I will weigh in. You know, this is my brother. I love him, okay? We love each other. We can disagree. That's what healthy friendships and debates are about. I don't see or understand how prayer, and let me say parenthetically, I was not on the other program several weeks ago, so I don't understand how prayer can be viewed as coercive. I just don't understand that. I don't see how prayer is such a beautiful thing. It is, and I don't think the coach forced anyone to come out and pray. I think it was an invitation, and I don't think the coach would have punished or reprimanded folks who didn't want to pray. And then I don't have the stats on this, and I hope it's not irresponsible of me to say this, but the number of abortions that have taken place since Roe v. Wade, I don't have the number, 60, 70 million, I don't know, somewhere around there. I don't know how many of those abortions were the result of rape and incest. But that's the narrative that we have heard since Roe v. Wade have been overturned, is the rape, the incest, and the life of the mother. I don't know how many abortions were a result of that. And again, I don't know if, you know, we use the phrase pro-religion, that there's a pro-religion shift in the Supreme Court. In a few years, I wouldn't be surprised if there are some other decisions made by the court, and then we will be saying it's anti-religious. You know, I think, you know, it just goes back and forth. But I don't know why we would say this is pro-religion just because we have a number of people, and I think on both sides of the political aisle, who would agree that, say, take abortion, that the court just gave it back to the states. I don't know if abortion is even in the Constitution, the right to an abortion. They gave it back to the states. And I think, I think we should, those of us who agree with the decision, I think we need to be humble. I don't think we need to be, taking victory laps and things like that. I think we should just be very humble. And I think we need to bring a level of sensitivity to the people who view themselves as losing the battle. So I just don't, prayer, and I have a challenge with that one there. I don't understand how it's coercive.
Can I just respond briefly to?
Sure. Well, I shouldn't say sure. It's up to the moderator.
Well, only this is that when abortion was legal, I mean, regardless of, the amount and all of, certainly I understand the concern. Sure. But the way the law stood, if a woman had an ectopic pregnancy in the state, she could have had, they could have taken the fertilized egg out and she could have been saved. But there are certain laws that are so draconian in some of the states that when the Supreme Court turned it back, what they did was that before, no evangelical Christian was ever forced to have an abortion. But now women who believe that it would be okay to take an ectopic pregnancy in certain states don't even have that freedom to do that without going against the laws of of that state.
Okay, I'm going to put that on a hold because I do want to hear from Dr. Roebuck while we still have some time here. So
Well, we don't have very much.
You can respond. I'll keep it
Let-
short
let-
from here.
let-
I
let me-
really want to respond, but go ahead.
Let me start by saying I'm not sure that in this lifetime we'll ever see justice. I really am, as a cynic, I want to say that's really the case. When I look at courts cases, and I watch courts all the time, I do not understand the disparity on why some people get heavy sentences and why some people get light sentences for the same crime or what appears to be the same crime or whatever. And I do think that politics plays a role, even though I was taught as a child. The courts are always neutral. They do not belong to the Democrat Party. They do not belong to the Republican Party. They're neutral. So much for truth. In any case, the reality is we have had a court for the last, I would say, 60 to 70 years. Ian Philbrick says it goes all the way back to World War II. We've never had such a religious court. We've basically had a court that is at best neutral, and in many cases, I would say, it has been anti-religion in the way it has made certain judgments. So when I look at this particular issue at the moment, I look at that and say, well, I may not like the final decision on Roe versus Wade. I may not like the final decision on Bremerton and Kennedy. I may not like, but it may be a way of balancing out what has been one way the other way for a long time, since World War II. Now, that doesn't mean that I want us to go back to what's back at World War II, but it doesn't mean I'm ready to judge what's going on immediately at this point. What I would say is that we do go back and forth and back and forth. I don't think it has deepened our commitment to religious liberty. I do think there are limits that we cannot cross, and I don't know exactly where all of those are. And I don't like the idea that it's just evangelical Christianity that's doing this. The position on abortion is long-time Catholic and Orthodox. It goes way back. So I think that's really important. And so I do think that if anybody needs prayer in the United States government, I think it is the court. The court needs prayer. They need to have a real sense of what it is that the people want, what it is that is actually right and just, and so forth, and not simply play with religion or religious leanings in any tangible way.
Thank you, and it's time for a break.
We hope you're enjoying today's program. If you'd like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the vision and history of the program, and we invite you to become a ministry partner explore our Town Hall Estates healthcare facilities, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, we look forward to receiving your letters. You may write us at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. If you have a prayer request, please send it to prayerrequest@americanreligious.org. Thank you for writing and thank you for watching. Now, back to today's closing statements.
Welcome back, and we've had a very energetic conversation today, and we're now going to hear the closing comments from our panelists.
Love the conversation, and I just think that personally I affirm the decisions that the Supreme Court made, and at the same time I think that as we need to have a great sense of humility and patience and care when it comes to expressing how we feel about what the court decisions are. And finally, I think we should pray for the Supreme Court because they are met with many decisions that will impact different population groups in the country.
Tony, I wholeheartedly agree with what you said. So as I reflect on this, I realize this is always more complicated than it appears in such a short period of time. I do get concerned that as there's even hand tipping towards certain cases being reopened that we've already covered, it reflects a particular point of view of certainly more conservative religious, not all religious, but conservative religious people, whether it's opening up the civil unions, gay marriage, whether it's opening up of the issue of contraception, whether it's all of those issues, including the ones we've talked about. This concerns me only because it seems like we're going back, and rather than developing or restricting, it's just overturning. And it seems to be done in the name of religious freedom, and that's troubling to me.
One of the things that I've enjoyed about this conversation is the fact that we went a long way from where we started. And I'm reminded that whenever, if you don't ever go off on a tangent, you're doomed to go around in circles. Yeah. So I'm appreciative of the tangent. I do reject the idea that there is such a thing as a pro-religion and anti-religion court. I think that the Supreme Court can be both pro and anti-religion, even if they veer more towards the free exercise or more towards the Establishment Clause. So I don't see any of the courts ever being hostile to religion. I see it as being more protective of that wall. One of the decisions we didn't talk about today was the Maine decision, which allowed for state funds to go to religious schools. In the Orthodox Jewish community, they're in love with that decision because they have large families that they want to send to parochial, to Jewish day schools, and it costs a lot of money to do that. And so to have state funds do that. But then I think that can be a very difficult, slippery slope because now you're going to use state funds in religious schools, which means the state has to have some vested interest in policing how those funds are used. I sent my kids to Jewish day school because I frankly didn't want the state to be involved with how I raised my kids in their Jewish identities. And I don't want the state to be able to say, no, you're not allowed to teach that way. But if a state funds are being used for that, I think, and that's why I raise that as an example, because I think that you end up opening doors to things that are dangerous. When we say in Roe v. Wade, and clearly we need another show about Roe v. Wade, that we're going to hand it back to the states. That'd be all fine if we knew that the states were actually going to be fair arbiters of ways to determine that. But we all know that the state houses are so terribly gerrymandered, whether to the left or to the right, that they're not accurate reflections of the population generally of that state. And you also end up with a free exercise issue with states. So, for example, there are times when Jewish law would not just tell you it's okay to have an abortion past 15 weeks if the mother's life is at stake. It tells you you are religiously obligated to have an abortion even at that late state, to save the life of the mother, even if the case is the mental anguish of the mother, not just the physical life of the mother. And so when you have a state that says, no, we're going to take a particular ideology about when life begins and enshrine that in law, I think you end up walking down a really complicated and in some cases dangerous road.
The courts are about the law, and the law is written by human beings who have propensities in one direction or another. They have biases. They tend to try to negotiate where they think is the least amount of resistance. But I think that what many of these laws do is they do overlook the reality that people are spiritual beings, and spiritual beings have thoughts that are related to religious ideologies. Why should not religion have a place in the making of judgments? I see no problem with that, unless it is being used to enforce, as you're suggesting here, some kind of an position that penalizes some people while aiding other people in an unjust way. I agree with you on the main decision. I thought that was a poor decision because you have Catholic schools all over the country. I mean, states could go bankrupt supporting Catholic school tuition costs and so forth. And I just am not sure that I want to give that much power to the state to help any church or any religious organization to do those kinds of things. But I do think that religious thinking needs to be taken seriously and become part of the discussions, even of the legal side of issues, especially those that deal with morality and ethics and even pastoral concerns.
Well, thank you all very much. And I think if we've learned nothing else from today, we've realized that law is not just that simple. It's very complicated, and decisions such as those made by the Supreme Court are not necessarily wrong.
Right.
Right. They just are based on realities, looking at it in different ways. But thank you very much. Thank you for the conversation. The Charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America, we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. And so now, friends, until next week at the same time and over the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.